Welcome to the tutorial on creating a 3D resource management game using Java. In this series, we will cover everything from setting up your development environment to implementing core game mechanics. Before we dive in, let's ensure you have the right tools installed. We will be using Java Development Kit, JDK, an integrated development environment, IDE, like IntelliJ IDEA or Eclipse, and a library such as libgdx for 3D rendering. Start by downloading and installing the JDK from the official Oracle website. Make sure to configure your environment variables accordingly. Next, download and install your preferred IDE. IntelliJ IDEA is recommended for its user-friendly interface and powerful tools. Now, let's set up a new project. Open your IDE and navigate to File, New Project. Select Java as the project type. Once you have your project created, you need to include the libgdx library. Go to the libgdx website and use the setup tool provided there. Follow the steps to generate a new libgdx project. Choose the settings according to your game specifications. Remember to select 3D as your project type. Now that we have our project set up with libgdx, let's discuss the game mechanics. The core mechanics of resource management should include gathering resources, building structures, and managing an economy. Let's start by creating a simple game class to initialize our game environment. We will create a class named ResourceGame.java. This initializes our camera and sets the perspective for our 3D world. It clears the screen and prepares for rendering every frame. Next, let's add some resources to gather. We will create a class resource to represent the resources in our game. The resource class contains attributes for the resource name and quantity, along with methods to gather and retrieve these values. Now let's create a manager for our resources. This will keep track of the resources available in the game. We can call this class Resource Manager. The Resource Manager allows us to easily add and retrieve resources, leveraging a hash map to manage them efficiently. Next, let's add some 3D models for our resources to make the game visually appealing. You can create 3D models using software like Blender. After creating your models, export them in the .gltf format and place them in the Assets folder of your libgdx project. We need to load these models in our game. We just added a method to load our resource model, which we can use later in the rendering process. Next, let's implement rendering of our resource in the game. We'll add rendering code to the render method. This will render our resource model in the 3D world based on the position of the camera. We'll need to set up an environment to handle lighting and effects. With the lighting setup, we can enhance the appearance of our resources. Let's define a method to create a user interface, UI, to manage resources and gather them efficiently. Here, we've created a new stage for our UI. libgdx handles user interaction wonderfully, allowing us to add buttons and labels to display resource counts. This button allows users to interact and gather resources. Don't forget to add it to the stage layout. Next, in our render method, we need to call the Stages Act and Draw methods to keep the UI responsive and visible. Let's add a way to visualize resource gathering. Add a simple text label displaying the available quantity of resources. This label is updated each time resources are gathered. Make sure to refresh this label with the latest quantity after gathering. As our game progresses, we can introduce structures that players can build. Let's create a building class to represent buildings in the game. Each building will have a name and a cost and resources. We will extend the Resource Manager to handle building costs and advancements. This provides a mechanism to check if enough resources are available before allowing the player to construct a building. Next, we will add a method to find buildings by name in our infrastructure, which will facilitate the building creation process. We need to provide a user interface for building selection, allowing players to choose what to build. Let's create building buttons similar to our gathering button. Adding these buttons to the stage allows players to build structures when they have sufficient resources. Ensure to position them correctly in your game UI. The final piece is implementing an event that triggers when a player builds a structure, enabling them to see their buildings in the game world. Finalize the tutorial by summarizing what we have learned so far. We covered launching a new Java project, integrating libgdx, creating resources, and managing a simple resource economy. As a recap, we should take note to always save our progress and test frequently. Game development often requires multiple iterations to achieve the desired functionality. Looking ahead, we can explore further aspects such as AI for resource gathering, improving graphics, enhancing UI, and even multiplayer support in future tutorials. Thanks for joining me today in developing this basic 3D resource management game. Make sure to share your experiences and questions in the comments. Happy coding!